Sorry about that. We had a little bit of a glitch with the computer, but I think we've overcome it. All is well. And if you've just joined us, James Zitting is on the phone with us tonight. If you go to beelanding.com, you'll see the beehives that he makes, and he takes a rather holistic approach to his beekeeping. And so we've been talking to James about beekeeping and getting a little bit better handle on how you might keep bees. So, hey, love to get your thoughts, ideas, questions for James, and he is on the phone with us. Now, James, just before the break, I had said to you that I'd like to learn more about different types of honey. I grew up on the west coast of British Columbia, and when there are fires there is a weed called fireweed that fills up the void very quickly. It's a beautiful, tall, pink flower, and the flavor of the honey that is made from this fireweed is incredible. Is it a difficult process to make certain types of honey? You know, obviously you can't have fireweed honey in this part of the world, but a clover honey or a certain type of flower honey, is there a way that you do that?
Yeah, you pretty much have to be in an area where there's a monocrop. You know, most of the clover honey comes from North and South Dakota, where in the summertime there's plenty of clover, and most of your big beekeepers head that way and take their bees up there for the clover crops. But in this country here around Springfield, Missouri, we pretty much have to call it wildflower honey because there's enough diversity in the flora that we can't really label it as any particular honey. However, there's different times of the year when different nectar is flowing. In the fall, you've got the goldenrod. A lot of people consider goldenrod as a weed. If you keep bees at all, you're going to really appreciate goldenrod because it's a good fall crop. And there's also aster, the little white flowers. And aster is a good fall crop, and aster has the most amazing scent, the most amazing smell comes from the hive. It's almost a vanilla, maple-ish type smell coming from the hive when they're bringing that aster nectar in. It's just intoxicating to sit and sniff that as it's coming in.
Now, when it comes to
it's pretty hard here.
Okay. When it comes to honey, I've heard different theories. The darker, the better. The lighter, the better. Is there any correlation between honey and color and quality?
I don't have a scientific answer for that. I know in the fall, toward the end of the season, the honey tends to get darker than in the spring. And also dark. Some of the dark honey is pollen particulates in the honey, makes it a little bit darker. And if you look at it from that aspect, then there may be a little bit more nutrition in it. But I don't have a scientific answer for that. It's more a preference.
Sure. Do you personally have a preference as far as a darker or lighter honey?
I just love the diversity. I love to taste the honey throughout the year, and I really don't have a preference. I've yet to find a honey that I don't like.
Is there?
It's just preference.
In places like Florida, you have a fairly sophisticated honey market, in that you have the orange blossom honey, you have the Tupelo honey, you have a lot of different things going on in Florida when it comes to honey. How diversified or how sophisticated, I guess, a honey market do we have in Southwest Missouri? Is there any sort of sophistication at all, or is it most folks still just going to the grocery store looking for the cheapest bottle they can find?
Well, in the grocery store, of course, you can find clover honey and maybe even Tupelo honey, but it's all imported.
Mm-hmm.
But if you buy honey from a beekeeper here in Southwest Missouri, you're going to get wildflower honey. We're not. It's not legal for us to give it any particular title because there's so much diversity.
No. You misunderstood my question, James. I'm sorry. Let me re-ask it. I'm talking about the consumer as far as, to be blunt, how bright and or sophisticated are people in this part of the country when it comes to honey? I mean, are there, like people have, at least in some parts of the country, acquired a taste for different types of coffee or different types of wine. Have people acquired any sort of sophistication when it comes to honey in this part of the country, or is it still pretty much whatever they find on the shelf?
Yeah, it's pretty much whatever the local beekeeper has. No, I haven't had a lot of sophistication from people, as far as preferences on the honey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that people moving in from here have their preference from where they moved from, but the locals here, they're pretty much used to the local honey.
Right. Do you find many of the local restaurants wanting to use local honey in some of their recipes? Much like there's a trend now in fine dining to use micro gardens in the back of the restaurant and incorporate some of those vegetables into the menu. Are you finding many of the local chefs coming to you, or local beekeepers looking for good local honey?
No, I have not. Now, I do. I have heard of places keeping beehives on their roofs. Commercial places like that, which creates quite a buzz. Pardon the pun, but it helps with advertising, and they can advertise their own honey, and I believe there's some people doing that, but it has to be a pretty sophisticated market to really pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the restaurants, around us, they'll buy the cheapest honey they can, because the consumer doesn't really understand the difference between honey quality.
Sure. Well, let's sort of run through this. If folks are listening, and maybe they're, no pun intended, getting the bug and thinking, I wouldn't mind. Let's start off with, I'm a first-time ever beekeeper. How many hives are too many hives for me to start with? Should I start with 1, 5? What's an optimum number to start with if I'm a beginner beekeeper?
I think 5 would probably be too many.
Mm-hmm.
I think 1 would not quite be enough. I think at least 2 would be a good thing to start with.
Okay.
A lot of people just start with 1. That's fine. That's fine to just start with 1. However, it's hard to compare. If you've got 2 or more, you can compare the 2. You really don't know if one of them's fallen behind if you don't have another one to compare
Sure.
with.
Now, how close can I have these 2 hives? Can they be right beside each other? Or is it better if they're, a few hundred yards or a couple miles? What would you want for minimum distance between 2 hives?
There's really no minimum distance. You can have them right next to each other, and you're going to have a certain amount of drifting back and forth, but that's common. That happens.
Mm-hmm.
The rule of thumb in this area is you don't want to have more than 20 hives in one yard, one apiary.
Sure.
I've got 2 of them, two colonies on my back porch, where most people have their barbecue grill. I've got a beehive, and it works fine. Our family has learned to deal with the bees, and they quite enjoy it.
Sure.
It's kind of fun to sit and watch.
Now, okay, so now I've got a couple of beehives, and then what do I do? I mean, what's next? Buying the bees, I guess. Talking to someone like yourself, or online or whatever. I mean, where's the best place to get bees? I guess from you would be the best, but are there other? Because I've seen you can buy bees online. Is that a good idea, or is it better to buy locally, or what's your thought on that?
Well, buying locally is always better, and of course mine are the best, but naturally.
Sure.
But mine are sold out, so I really can't offer anymore. Buying them locally from a local beekeeper is your best bet. However, that's kind of hard to find. So most people end up buying packages, and you can go online and order a package, and most of those packages come from the southern states, from an industrial beekeeping plantation down there. And of course, they've been medicated and fed sugar, and the queens have they've got the poor genetics, but that's what you can start with and get them going and feed them honey instead of sugar like they recommend, and get them up and going, and then the bees will, if the queen's not up to par, if she's not a good queen, the bees will supersede her, and then the new queen will breed with the local survivor genetics, and eventually they'll naturalize and become a natural colony of bees.
Okay, so what do I need to do once I put the bees in the hive? What kind of maintenance do they need?
Well, to install the bees, it's quite intimidating for a first-time beekeeper to get a package of bees in the mail and install the bees in the beehive. And so I'll kind of run through that briefly with you.
Sure.
It's the bees are typically very docile when they come in a package. They're all discombobulated and so they're usually quite docile, and it's just a matter of removing some of the bars on the top of my hive, and then you take you open the package and you just shake them down in there. They just shake down as it fall down in clumps. A few bees will fly out and around, and you might want to put a veil on if you're intimidated and you don't like to get stung, because you could get stung doing that. And then the queen comes in her own little cage, and you hang the cage in there, so that the bees will gather around the queen. And then you go in the second day to make sure the queen's out of her cage. If not, then you go ahead and open the cage and let her out. And you also want to check and make sure that because we let the bees build the comb off of the top bars, you need to check on day 2 and make sure that they're building parallel to the top bars and not crisscross, because if they do, then you got a real mess on your hands. And so you'll want to check that, and usually they will follow the top bars, but I've found that about 1 in 20 will go their own way.
Sure.
And so you have to get that fixed right away, and day 2 is the best time to fix that. And if they're building crosswise, then you just twist the comb. It's quite the wax is quite soft. You just twist it straight, and that'll just get them on a straight path at that point.
Sure. Now, do you? So you've got the comb started, and then and that's day 2. So for the rest of the time, I mean, how often do you stick your nose in there and go, "How are you guys doing?"
Well, you'd want to go in probably day 5. You'll want to go in somewhere around there, check on them. And of course you feed them honey when you install them. So you want to go in about day 5 and take the empty bag out that you fed them the honey in, and make sure that they've got the queen's laying. You do that by checking for eggs, little teeny white specks that you'll see inside the comb. You want to check that if she's laying, that's good. And if there's nectar, if you see some nectar in the combs, then you don't need to feed them anymore. And that's really about all you need to do on day 5. It's really quite simple. I'd say go in again probably the second week, and by then they should have comb drawn, probably about the size of a basketball hanging down, and you just the same thing. Check and make sure that they're bringing. Now, if you have a prolonged storm, a cold snap like we're having now, or lots of rain for a week or so, then you'll probably need to feed them some more at that point, because they could starve to death because they're not able to bring in any nectar with bad weather.
Sure. Now,
of course, you'll need to check for that as well.
When can you start your hive?
Pardon me?
When should you start the hive?
The hives typically beginning of April till the middle or end of May.
Okay.
Is the best time.
So we're just coming into that window now.
This year we're just coming into it, and this cold weather here would not be a good time. But if you've got bees ordered and they show up, then you just deal with it, and you just feed them a little bit more until the weather clears up.
Sure. Now, you had said earlier that the bees like to keep I think you said 95-degree environment going in the hive. is there anything that you need to do in the wintertime as far as the hive? Like, do you move your hives to an area that's warmer, or just leave them where they are? Or I mean, is there anything that you do environmentally to keep the hive warm?
No, you don't. If it makes you feel better, you could shove some grass clippings or leaves or something underneath the tarp for added insulation. But you don't want to fool the bees into thinking it's warmer than it is outside, or the queen will ramp up her production, and their numbers will grow enough that they'll consume all their honey and then starve
die.
to death.
Yeah. Okay.
Bees reduce their numbers way down in the wintertime, and they get down to a manageable size, about the size of halfway between a basketball and a baseball,
Mm-hmm.
And kind of maintain their numbers, and you want them to know that it's cold outside. You don't want to fool them. However, they do need that cellulose material to help, for absorbing and releasing moisture and being a buffer from the harsh elements outside.
Sure. Now, does it matter what kind of wood you use in the hive? Is there a particular type of wood that you like to use when you make your hives?
No, it doesn't really matter because I ship these hives around the country. I naturally find the lightest wood I can.
Sure.
To save on freight, but
Mm-hmm.
the bees have no preference.
So there's no they tend to like white cedar over red cedar. I'm just being silly. Well, other things.
Yeah. No, there's no preference.
Sure. Is there anything else that someone that's looking at maybe starting with a couple of hives this year? Is there anything else that they should know? If I wanted to start a hive, is there enough information off of your website that I can pretty much figure out what I need to do, or are there other resources you recommend, or how would someone get started?
Yeah, there's a fair amount on my site. There's another site, bushfarms.com. Michael Bush. If you do a search for Michael Bush,
Mm-hmm.
he's one of these old timer, no nonsense type beekeepers that's questioned everything and boiled beekeeping down to a very simple process. And yeah, I just love this guy's philosophy. He's been a great influence on me. Highly recommend it. There's one problem that new beekeepers have is they go to bee clubs, and most bee clubs have been trained by commercial beekeepers and the extension agencies,
Mm-hmm.
extension offices, and they frankly tell you to do everything wrong. I don't know any better way to put it.
Sure.
I say that going to a bee club to learn how to keep bees is kind of like asking Monsanto how to grow an organic garden.
Yeah. Good luck.
That might be a little harsh saying that, but it's getting my point across.
No, it does.
I go to my local bee club, but I kind of keep my mouth shut. I try not to be controversial, and I glean what I can. The old timers they talk about what's blooming and what flow is on in what time of year, and I learn a lot from them. But they frankly they generally speaking they give you bad advice.
You've been doing this for over 20 years, and it sounds to me like it's a love, and it sounds to me like every day you're learning something new.
Yeah, it's something I really enjoy doing. It's a lot of fun. My whole family gets involved. We give speeches for Mother Earth News fairs, the events they put on around the country, and
Mm-hmm.
we have a booth at the fair, and my entire family and extended family gets involved, and it is a lot of fun. We really enjoy it.
Well, there's a lot of talk about killer bees and aggressive bees and such, and my mom, her father raised bees. I never got to meet my grandfather on my mom's side, but my mom was very comfortable around bees, and so she taught me the same thing. And fortunately, I'm not I've been stung, but I'm not allergic, and so I tend to be very calm around bees, when other people are totally freaking out. That being said, how aggressive is the average bee, and if there's a hive, is there a safety zone that if you come upon a hive somehow that you should stay, X feet away or what have you?
Well, most of society is kind of I don't know the right word for it, but kind of wimps.
Yeah.
And they freak out when anything that might danger them is in the immediate area. I say nature is dangerous. Just jump in and enjoy it, and if you get stung, suck it up and keep going.
Mm-hmm.
And I might be a little harsh, but I'm kind of overreacting to this safe society that everybody's trying to create. I get stung frequently. Of course, I don't wear the gear and I don't use smoke. I recommend, first-time beekeepers wear gear and use the smoke because it's not as distracting. A bee sting can be kind of distracting when you're trying to work them.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the killer bee hype, it's mostly hype. There is a strain of bees that came from Africa, and they're more suited for a tropical climate, and they're not going to survive up here in the cold country because they swarm too much. So nature's going to only let them come up, a certain temperature, and then they're going to die out, and they're just not going to survive up here in the cold country. So it's mostly hype. The whole term killer bee is media
sure.
Hype.
Well, are bees just your regular honeybees? Are they territorial at all in the sense of, it's best to stay 15, 20 feet, 5 feet? I mean, is there sort of a zone of safety that you recommend to folks as far as, hey, when you come across a hive, stay this far away and you'll be fine?
Well, every hive is different. Some hives are really nasty and mean, and other hives you can go clear through them without any gear and never get a sting. But never walk in front of the hive because you got bees. The bees will come out on the front porch of the hive, and then they'll beeline it to their pollen or nectar source wherever they're going, and same coming back. They're just coming back, full bore. And if you walk in front of the hive, you're going to get smacked by an incoming bee that's going to sting you as it hits you. So don't walk between the in the bee path. Stay out of the bee path. So we'll walk around the back of the hive. And if you get stung, suck it up and keep going.
Sure.
No, I'm being harsh. I know there are people that are allergic to bees.
Sure.
And if you're allergic to bees, then
you have to be careful.
Stay clear, but
sure. Now, I understand, I've talked to a couple of folks and read a little bit, enough to be dangerous, about bee therapy, people using bee stings to help them with arthritis and other diseases as well. Have you done much research into so-called bee sting therapy?
No, I've read a little about it, but I'm not an expert. But I know there's a lot of people that swear by it, and there's a fellow that had MS, had a terrible case of MS, and he decided to keep bees, and he does it without any equipment, and he gets stung frequently. He swears by it. He says it helps him.
Yeah.
I've never really experienced any pros or cons.
Yeah, I've met people with both MS and with arthritis, and they say that the bee stings seem to keep the disease at bay. So I would hope somebody's doing some research on that. But then again, if Big Pharma can't copyright it, then they are patented. they may not do anything with it. You never know. This has been fascinating. I'm really grateful for your time. And it sounds like if folks are interested, they need to get busy. Now, if they want a starter hive, they're available on your website. Now, typically, let's say I were to order one tonight, do you then have to go out and build it and ship it to me, or do you have some ready to go? What's the typical turnaround time for a hive right now?
Well, right now I'm about a month out on the hives.
Mm-hmm.
So if you order one today, it's probably about a month before you'll get one.
Right.
Unfortunately, I'm not able to do this for a living at this point. So I do have a full-time job, and my two teenage sons are doing a lot of the work building the hives. I've kind of trained them and I coach them a little bit. They do a lot of the work. But yeah, we're about a month out, unfortunately.
Right. And as far as bees, you're sold out for this year. Is there a resource where people could go to look for local bees? Is there like an online site you'd recommend, or do you have links on your own site?
No, I don't know of any online source. I do recommend they call their local fire department, their local 911 operators.
Mm-hmm.
I just walk in on them. I just visit and get on the list for swarm removals. And people will call. There's a ball of bees hanging, on their fence or in their apple tree, and they're freaked out and they don't know what to do. And you can show up with a simple cardboard box and shake them into the box and tape it shut and go shake them into your hive. It's a very simple procedure. It seems intimidating, but bees, when they're in the swarming mode, are very docile
Mm-hmm.
and easy to catch. You just make sure you've got the queen. You hold the box under a branch. If you're in the branch of a tree, you hold the box under and you smack the branch and knock them down into the box. They fall down as a big clump, and they'll usually gather again on the branch, and quite often the queen will be in there, so you want to smack it again. Make sure you get the queen, and you can usually tell you've got the queen because the bees will fan the pheromones of the queen out away from the cluster of bees, because they want to spread her smell out so that it kind of creates a congealing. It unites the straggler bees. They can smell her pheromones, and it unites them all. So if you look at the direction of how the bees are fanning, what direction they're fanning from, they're usually fanning away from the queen. That kind of helps you know whether you've got the queen or not.
Sure. This is neat. I'm excited. I'll be talking to you offline as far as getting started this year. You and I had talked about this last fall, so I want to follow through with this and get a couple of hives going this year, and I'm really I'm excited and looking forward to it. So this has been fascinating, and thank you.
I do have workshops. I do about once a month. We do a workshop where I take people through my hives, and they, some people don't know how they will do around bees, and this is a good way to find out. And I also you get 3 hours of my philosophizing about bees as well.
So I can just sign up for that online.
Sure, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, just go online. You can see the schedule. And
excellent.
Yeah.
Well, again, James, blessings on you and your bee enterprise, and thank you very much for being so gracious and generous with your time tonight. This has been fascinating. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the time.